Hey everybody, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube, right, and subscribe to the blog. You don't want to miss out on giveaways, contests, special announcements, special events, different things like that, okay? So there's benefits to being both a YouTube subscriber and a blog subscriber, and they are both absolutely free, right? So if you're new, this is how this works. You send a question, Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com, or you can find me on any social network. My two recent favorites are Snapchat and Instagram, right? But I like them all: LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, whatever you want. Or the real old-fashioned way: call or text 949-415-6256. You send your questions. I'll do a video response if it's good, and I think there's value there for the rest of the community. And I'll keep you anonymous, alright? So let's get right into it. Today's question is a good one. And it's from someone who, of course, will remain anonymous. But it says, hey, I'm forming an LLC with a partner physician who currently runs his own medical practice. The research site will be a 50-50 partnership between me and the physician, but I will serve as the CEO and manage all daily operations. My current dilemma is preparing the terms of the contract. While this is a 50-50 arrangement, I would like to propose that I draw a salary from the business, since this will be the sole occupation and will be running all daily activities of the business. The PI will retain the practice next door and perform PI duties. We will also have a sub-I for certain items. Would you agree that it is reasonable to propose the PI be paid initially per the service performed, while my husband draws a salary for running the business, and then they both split any profits 50-50? In my assessment, this is fair. In my assessment, it's fair too. It really depends on the individual. I mean, oftentimes what we think is fair may not be fair for somebody else, or they may not think it's fair for whatever reason. Sometimes egos get involved. But you're definitely doing the right thing by thinking about these things first. The next step is to have a conversation with him and say, hey, would you think it's fair that we propose that I get a salary, because I'll be doing 100% of my time and income will be derived from this venture, and yours, I mean, we won't need you as often, so we'll need you for a few procedures, but you're definitely not going to have 100% of your time invested in this company. Would you think it's fair that we pay you based on procedures you conduct, and I'll draw a salary? We might think it's fair. He might say yes. But, I mean, I know what I would do if I were him, alright? I would say, hey, let's try not to, either of us, to draw a salary for the first 6 months, because the first 6 months we're not going to have any revenue coming in. And after that, let's talk about you getting a salary proportionate to your time. So if $60,000 a year for you, before you split profits, if, let's say, your salary is going to be $60,000 a year because you're putting in 100% of your time. Well, if he's putting in 20% of the time, his salary should be X, all right? And it's simple ratios to figure this out. That's what I would propose if I were, and I always try to put myself in the position of the other person in the deal. That's what I would propose, or I would counter with, hey, is there any way you can not draw a salary right now for the first 6 months? Because we're funding this company out of our own pockets, and I don't know who's doing the financing, because if he's doing all the financing and you're not doing any, I mean, if I were him in that situation, I wouldn't be comfortable for you taking a salary if I'm putting up all the money. Now, if you're both putting up the money, that's different, but if he's putting up all the money, your free labor with no salary is kind of like your contribution that's matching his contribution, because while he may not be putting in the amount of hours you're putting in, he's putting in the capital, right? So I don't know those details. If you're both contributing equally financially, it's a little bit of a different conversation, but then it's really like you're just taking out money from one pocket and putting into the other. You're literally paying yourself at that point. If it's your own money that you're using to pay your salary. So a lot of things go into play here, right? And I don't know all the details, but if I'm putting in all the money, I don't want anyone taking a salary until I'm paid back. But I would be willing to consider not getting paid back, and both of us taking a salary once we start generating some revenue, as long as I'm getting a salary too. So if you're getting X amount of dollars, I want to get X amount of dollars proportionate to the work I'm putting in before profits. And both of those salaries have to be reasonable enough to where, first of all, the IRS is going to be okay with it. So you can't just pay yourself like $300,000 a year in salary, because that will take out all the profits, right? So you got a lot of work to do. I would definitely talk to him about it. Have these conversations before you draft up the paperwork. I know a lot of people use LegalZoom when they get started. I've used LegalZoom for a lot of my LLCs I've started, and that's fine. You can use those draft templates, but when issues like this come across or pop up, and you're like well into month 3 of your business, and now you're thinking, hey, I'm putting in all this work, this guy's not, and all we're doing is splitting 50-50. That's like the worst time to call a meeting and have this discussion. This discussion should be happening now, as you will do, before you even start the venture officially. But that's my take on this, right? He could be different, and of course you want to negotiate what's best for you, but you also want to be fair for the business and for your partners, right? You've got an ethical responsibility to do that. And just by the fact of you emailing me this question shows that you've got strong ethics, and you want to do what's reasonable and right for not only yourself and the LLC, but also your partner. So you're taking into account his side of the thing and his side of the argument and his side of the deal. But just know that if it were me in his shoes and I'm putting up all the money, I don't think I'd be comfortable with someone taking salary from month 1 when this is an unproven venture so far. All right. Now your second question is, do you have any advice on industry standards for when a partner physician retires? Are they always entitled to half of the business value and required to be bought out in order to retire? We are concerned because the physician may retire in 10 years and I may want to continue well beyond 20 years. So being a PI and being an owner of an LLC have nothing to do with each other. All right? You can have an LLC, a research clinic LLC, with 5 study coordinator non-MD owners. Or you can have an LLC with 20 all MD owners. Being an owner of the LLC has nothing to do with when a physician retires. All right? You can put certain things in there, like, and I'm no attorney, you need to talk to your attorney. You can put a buyout clause in there stating that, hey, I have the right to buy you out at this price if we both agree to that, and likewise you have the right to buy me out at this price in the future if we both agree to that. But that's the key thing right there. If you both agree to it, you cannot force someone to give up their membership of an LLC. An LLC is a completely separate entity. It's just like a human being in that regard. It has its own social security number, which is a tax ID number, and it's like a separate entity from you and from your partner. So the whole point, when I build businesses, what I'm trying to do, I'm not trying to work there forever and just have the business pay me based on how hard I work. That's not what I do. What I do when I set up a research clinic, or any company for that matter, is I work really hard the first 5 to 10 years, and I try to make it so that the business generates revenue with less and less and less and less of my involvement over time, so that I can take off and start other ventures and still receive a passive income from the business that I worked hard to build. So if in 10 years he doesn't want to retire, well, he may not want to give up his shares of the 50-50 split you guys have, because that's firm. That's already in writing. 50-50 split, he's legally entitled to 50% of the profits. That's when you might start having a conversation about paying yourself a higher salary. In exchange, he would get a dividend. But again, it's got to be fair and reasonable salary. So you can't, and again, putting myself in his shoes, I would want a passive investment if I worked 10 years of my career to build this asset that's now producing cash flow for me. As far as having the PI, that's a totally separate issue. PIs retire all the time. It's the responsibility of the company or of the site to have PIs come in and replace them. So if you know that at year 10 he's going to retire, at year 7 and 8, definitely year 9, I'm going to be grooming other PIs to take his place. And then you got to work out an agreement with them or an arrangement with them and say, hey, maybe we'll give you some shares, maybe we'll just pay you salary. You got to work it out with the PIs at that point. It would really depend on how badly you need them and what they want out of it as well. So if your PI who's going to be retiring and you have this conversation at that time and say, hey, we're both willing to give up 10% of our shares. So you give up 10, your PI gives up 10, in order to give the new PI 20% plus a salary. Then you still have an asset that's producing cash flow for you, even if he's retired, and you can be less involved at that point too. Or if you don't want to be less involved, you can take on a bigger salary because you can afford that now, and it's as long as it's fair and reasonable and it's in writing. So you can make amendments to these agreements all the time, but that's the whole thing, is you're both 50-50, so you both get equal say in what goes on. And then if you end up giving 10% up to the new PI, same thing with the old PI, if he gives up 10%, you're both 40-40, you still control the majority of the decisions. The new guy who has 20%, he still has rights, he's entitled to his 20% of profits, but you guys are the decision makers. And again, consult with legal because every state, every situation is different. I'm no attorney, but that's my take on your issues. Hopefully this helps. Thanks a lot for your questions. Keep them coming. Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Take care.